Buckle up. This story doesn't ease you in. It drops you straight into the storm. He was already sitting in my chair when I walked in, feet up, plateful, laughing. And my wife, she was beside him wearing the sweater I got her for our anniversary, the one she said was too warm to ever wear in public. "Hey, Russell," she chirped, waving at me like I was just back from the store. I wasn't. I had driven 2 hours from a miserable client meeting, caught in traffic for another hour, and finally made it to our family cabin in upstate New York. The place we agreed would be ours for the weekend. No guests, no phones, just us. And yet, there he was, sitting where I sit, using my mug, eating ribs my father grilled, calling my mother ma'am with that boyish smirk like he'd always belonged. His name was Landon, and if smug had a face, it was his. I stood there like a tourist in my own life, no one rushing to explain, no one looking the least bit concerned. I looked at my dad. He gave me that tight, awkward smile that says, "Let's not make this weird." My mom was gushing over how helpful Landon had been setting up the new patio furniture. My sister was laughing at something he said. Meanwhile, my hands were still dirty from changing a tire in a gas station parking lot. "Landon's in marketing," Belle said, tossing it out like that answered every question. Then she added, "He came up a day early to help me get things ready." I hadn't been invited early. I hadn't even been texted. What I had been was replaced, or at least that's how it felt. He stood up to shake my hand, deliberately slow, deliberately firm. "Heard a lot about you, man," he said with that deep, relaxed voice that sounded like it belonged on a podcast. I wanted to crush his fingers. Instead, I smiled because that's what I do. I nod. I don't cause scenes. I don't shout. I simmer quietly until something inside me boils over, and no one sees it coming. And this time, something was already bubbling. Belle hadn't touched me in 2 months. She said she was exhausted from work. She said she needed space. She said she needed emotional clarity. Turns out emotional clarity looked like 6 feet 2 inches of chiseled charm who plays tennis on weekends and quotes self-help books like scripture. I was barely through the doorway and I already knew. He wasn't just a guest. He was the test. A test to see how much I could take before I broke. A test to see if the nice guy would finally snap. But I don't snap. I observe. And what Landon didn't know, what no one in that room realized, is that I'd been preparing for this moment for weeks. Watching, collecting, recording, waiting. Because if he thought humiliating me in front of my family would make him the alpha, he had no idea what kind of storm was about to blow the roof off this cabin. I sat through dinner like a ghost, fork in hand, smiles stapled on, nodding at stories I wasn't part of, while Landon dominated the table like it was his stage. He told jokes that weren't even funny, but everyone laughed. He leaned in when my mom spoke, complimented my dad's grilling skills like he was earning points. He even rubbed my wife's back gently, absent-mindedly, like it was nothing, like it wasn't my wife and she led him. She let him. She smiled at him the way she used to smile at me. It felt like I was watching a movie about my own life, and I was just some side character who used to matter. When dessert came, I excused myself. No one stopped me, not even Belle. I went upstairs to the guest room, shut the door, and pulled out my old laptop. I had been collecting data for weeks, not because I'm paranoid, but because I'm methodical. You see, Belle started acting different months ago. Guarded with her phone, locking the screen mid-text, coming home late with new perfumes she claimed were samples from work. At first, I thought I was imagining things. But one night, When she fell asleep with her phone in her hand, I took a chance. What I found was a thread of conversations with someone saved under the name RL, which apparently stood for Raw Lion. I'll let you figure out what that nickname suggests. Photos, messages, voice notes, and one especially vivid video I never dared to watch in full, but I saved it. Backups, timestamps, cloud storage. She thought I was soft. She thought I was clueless. What she didn't realize is that being quiet doesn't mean being blind. And being polite doesn't mean being powerless. I stayed in that room for 2 hours. Everyone else was around the fire pit roasting marshmallows, sipping wine, singing along to Landon's acoustic guitar performance. Yes, he brought a guitar. Of course he did. And they were eating it up. The man, the myth, the boyfriend of the woman still wearing my ring. Later that night, I came downstairs just as Landon said, "Belle deserves someone who shows up for her." Everyone laughed, even my sister. My own sister. I just stood there in the doorway and said calmly, "You're right, Landon. She does deserve someone who shows up, and you deserve to know exactly what showing up looks like." I pulled out the TV remote and cast my phone to the living room screen. No one expected it. No one knew what I was about to play, but I did. And as the screen flickered to life, I didn't flinch, not even when Belle stood up and gasped, not even when my dad said, "What is this?" Not even when Landon's face turned the color of ash. It was just a preview, 15 seconds of blurred lines and clear betrayal, enough to freeze every laugh in that room, enough to wipe the smugness off every face. Then I shut it off. "That's what you missed while you were being funny," I said, turning to Landon. "That's your queen, your prize, your perfect partner. And that's how she treats the people who love her." I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. I didn't even wait for her to speak. I just walked out. Because sometimes the loudest thing you can do is leave. The silence after I played that clip wasn't normal silence. It was surgical. Like someone had sliced the air with a blade and all the oxygen had spilled out. No one said a word. Not my mom, not my dad, not even my loudmouth sister who always had something snarky to add. Just wide-eyed stares, like I dropped a bomb at the dinner table. And maybe I had. But the truth, that wasn't even the real bomb. That was just the match. The detonation had been loading for months. I left the cabin without slamming the door. I didn't need to. The silence did that for me. I sat in my car for a few minutes, heart thudding, palms slick. Not because I regretted it, but because after all this time, I'd finally acted. And it scared me a little. How calm I was. I expected rage, explosions, but what I felt was clarity. Cold, surgical, exact. Belle texted me 15 minutes later. "What was that? You embarrassed everyone. No apology, no shock. Just damage control." I stared at the screen, rereading those words as if they'd rearrange into something human if I blinked long enough. They didn't. I didn't reply. Instead, I drove to a cheap hotel 2 towns over. Not because I didn't have somewhere else to go, but because I needed neutral ground. I needed space to breathe where no one knew my name or what just happened. The room smelled like bleach and stale coffee, but the bed was clean, and no one had ever laid in it, pretending to love me while texting another man. Around 1 a.m., my phone rang. It was my sister. "I didn't know Russ," she said. "I thought he was just a friend." We all did. I didn't know how to respond. I wanted to scream. You should have seen it. You should have felt something was off. But the truth is, I'd hidden it well. I wore my humiliation like a well-ironed shirt, crisp folded, presentable. I'm sorry, she added softly. He left, stormed off. Dad's furious, Mom's crying. Andal, she's acting like you ruined everything. That made me laugh. Actually, laugh. The idea that I ruined anything when all I'd done was pulled back the curtain she'd wrapped around her performance. I told my sister I needed a few days. She understood mostly. The next morning, Belle sent a longer message, a list of excuses, really. How she and Landon weren't technically anything yet. How they connected emotionally. How I had become cold and absent. The irony made my stomach twist. She painted herself like the victim of a loveless marriage. I wondered how many of her friends she'd already told that version of the story to. I wondered how many believed her. I replied with one sentence. I'll let my lawyer talk to yours. That got her attention. The call started then. The crying voicemails, the can we talk in person messages. But it was too late. I wasn't going to explain myself to someone who'd already rewritten our story. I wasn't going to plead my case to a woman who saw me as an obstacle, not a partner. By the end of the week, I had filed quietly, cleanly. She hadn't expected that. She thought I'd stew, maybe beg, maybe cling to the scraps of what we had. But she underestimated one thing. I may not shout, I may not punch walls, but I finish what others are too cowardly to admit they started. And Landon, he didn't just walk away embarrassed. He walked away exposed. Turns out his little confidence show had some skeletons of its own, which I'll get to next. Because this isn't just a story about betrayal. It's a story about reclaiming your voice when everyone tries to speak for you. By the third day after the cabin implosion, my phone had gone quiet. No more calls from Belle, no fake apologies, no sudden claims that she still loved me deep down. Nothing. The silence, I admit, felt strange at first, like walking through a hallway you used to know by heart, and suddenly finding the furniture rearranged. But I wasn't naive. I knew her silence didn't mean peace. It meant strategy. Then came the email subject line. Please don't destroy me. It was long, filled with dramatic phrasing and cherry-picked memories. She talked about vulnerability, how I never saw her, how she felt alone even in our most intimate moments. She played the victim card so hard I could almost hear the tiny violin swelling behind each paragraph. But what really stood out was the final line. I hope you won't do anything reckless. We both have reputations to protect. That's when I knew I'd hit a nerve. See, before all of this, I never cared much about social media. I didn't post selfies. I didn't document dinner plates, but Belle did. She lived for it. Her Instagram was a curated museum of filtered perfection. Relationship quotes, smiling brunches, blurry sunsets, and, of course, countless photos of us, always framed like we were the next great American love story. The irony, most of those posts were taken during the month she was already pulling away. She crafted an illusion while privately auditioning a replacement. So, I made a decision. I wasn't going to post the video. I wasn't going to humiliate her online. That would make me just like her, someone performing for an audience addicted to applause. No, I had a better idea, one that was slower, quieter, but far more surgical. I contacted an old friend of mine, Damon, who worked in corporate security and digital forensics, the kind of guy who made a career out of quietly uncovering what people didn't want found. I gave him Landon's name. That's it, just a first name and a face. Within 48 hours, Damon had a file. Turns out Landon had a past, and not the sexy, mysterious kind. I'm talking about 2 separate workplace complaints for inappropriate conduct, a non-disclosure agreement tied to a female employee 5 years younger than him, and a forced relocation from his last job due to professional conflicts. In other words, he wasn't just a homewrecker. He was a repeat offender with a smile. But what made this golden? He worked in a management firm that just won a new account through Belle's company. She wasn't just sleeping with the enemy. She was handing contracts to him. Conflict of interest? Track career suicide. So I packaged everything. Emails, photos, voice messages, timeline. Not for public shame, but for leverage. I scheduled a quiet lunch with Belle's firm's general counsel. Told them this wasn't a threat, but a warning. Told them I had no interest in destroying reputations, only in protecting mine. They listened. The next day, Landon was suspended pending investigation. The following Monday, he was gone, not fired, not disgraced, just vanished. But in corporate terms, that's as loud as a public flogging. Belle, for the first time since this all began, called me sobbing. She begged to meet, said I had destroyed her world. I almost laughed. No, Belle, you destroyed it. I just stopped pretending it was still standing. I didn't agree to meet. I didn't send comfort. I let her sit in it. Because some people need to watch the house they burned collapse brick by brick before they understand what they really lost. The funny thing about exposing a lie is that people don't always thank you for it. You'd think that once you reveal the truth, the kind that leaves no room for doubt, no, he said, she said, people would rally behind you. They'd say, we're sorry, we should have seen it. They'd apologize for laughing at the wrong jokes, for treating you like the sideshow. But no, that's not what happened. A week after Landon was quietly dismissed, and Belle's phone calls went from pleading to angry silence, I was invited to Sunday dinner at my parents' place. I wasn't sure what to expect. Maybe awkward tension, maybe guarded support. But what I got was something else entirely. I showed up with a bottle of wine and that weird hollow in my chest that you carry around when your life has shifted and no one's caught up yet. My mom opened the door, smiled a little too politely, and led me inside without a hug. Dad was in the kitchen carving a roast, jaw tight. My sister was already at the table, flipping through her phone like she hadn't been there the night Landon called me the tech guy. And everyone laughed. We sat, we ate, we chewed in silence. It was Belle's absence that screamed the loudest. Then, halfway through dinner, my mom set her fork down and said, "Russell, I need to ask, did it have to go that far?" That far? I blinked. You mean uncovering that her boyfriend was a predator with a corporate history? Or the part where she lied to everyone for 6 months and humiliated me in front of my own family? She sighed. It's just we've known Belle a long time. You two were good once. Maybe you could have handled it more. Privately? Privately? I stared at my plate. The roast was dry. Everything suddenly felt dry. I looked around that table and realized something horrifying. I was now inconvenient. My pain, my reaction, my boundary. It made them uncomfortable. I had shattered the illusion, and now they wanted the picture back, even if it meant taping the pieces together. Dad finally spoke. You embarrassed everyone, son, not just her. I leaned back in my chair, trying not to shake. So, I was supposed to let them keep smiling while they replaced me. Is that what this is? You'd rather have her boyfriend playing football in the yard with your grandkids while I keep bringing the watermelon and pretending I matter. No one answered. I realized something in that silence. Some people, even the ones who love you, don't want the truth. They want comfort. They want what's familiar. They want you to stay quiet so they don't have to feel guilty for not seeing it themselves. I left that night without dessert. No goodbyes, no hugs. Just that deep, gnawing loneliness that hits when your support system has cracks running through it. Belle messaged me the next morning, a single line. "They're turning on me now, too. Happy?" I didn't reply. I wasn't happy. Not even close. I didn't want revenge. I wanted peace. But peace doesn't come wrapped in apologies. It comes when you stop begging others to understand and start building something that doesn't rely on their approval. The worst part? I had no one to talk to. Not really. Everyone had picked a side, and most of them weren't standing on mine. But what they didn't know is that I wasn't done yet. Because sometimes when the world pushes you into the role of villain, the only way out is through. And I was ready to start rewriting everything. I hadn't planned on speaking to my cousin Jeremy again anytime soon. We weren't particularly close. He was the charming, extroverted type who always managed to land on his feet, even after messing up big. Growing up, he was the one who got caught stealing liquor from our uncle's basement and somehow convinced everyone I had dared him. Still, when he texted me out of the blue saying, "Saw the drama? Want to grab a drink?" I said yes. I needed a break from the echo chamber of my own thoughts. And maybe, just maybe, someone who hadn't married me or raised me might actually get it. We met at a grimy little bar off Route 9, the kind of place where no one asks questions, and the jukebox still plays 90s rock without irony. He already had 2 drinks in by the time I arrived. As soon as I sat down, he slid a whiskey toward me like we were co-conspirators. "Man, you went nuclear," he said, grinning. "About time someone in this family grew a spine." It wasn't comforting. Not really. But I let him talk. He told me I'd done the right thing. That Belle always looked down on me. That she'd been treating me like a doormat for years and we'd all just ignored it because, well, she was pretty and charismatic, and knew how to manipulate a room. "Landon's a parasite," Jeremy added, taking another swig. "You did the company a favor." I almost thanked him until he leaned in and said, "So listen, now that you've burned the house down, what's next?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, you've got people's attention. Momentum, leverage, you could flip this whole thing, go public, start a blog, a podcast, sell the story. People love this crap, especially when the guy doesn't take it lying down." I stared at him, unsure if he was serious. "You think I want to monetize this?" He laughed. "Why not? Milk it. Everyone's already talking. Might as well get paid for the pain." I stood up, left the drink untouched, walked out without saying another word. Because what Jeremy didn't get, what almost nobody got, was that this wasn't a brand. It wasn't content. It was my life, my marriage, my family. This wasn't entertainment. It was collapse. But his words stuck with me, not the part about money, the part about people talking, because they were. My coworkers, neighbors, even acquaintances from my gym had started acting differently. Some offered vague support. Others watched me with pity, or worse, curiosity. I was no longer Russell, the quiet guy in it. I had become Russell, the guy whose wife had an affair with a golden retriever in human form. And then came the message that froze me. It was from Landon, sent to my email. No subject, just one line. "You think this is over? I still have more of her than you ever did." I sat there staring at the screen, the cursor blinking like a heartbeat. I didn't forward it. I didn't respond. I didn't scream. Instead, I copied it, pasted it into a new document, added it to the growing archive. Because what Landon didn't know, what even Belle didn't fully realize, was that I wasn't reacting anymore. I was collecting. And if he wanted a war, he was finally going to see what happens when the weak guy stops playing nice and starts playing for keeps. There's something dangerously empowering about no longer needing approval. For weeks, I walked on emotional eggshells, afraid of being too harsh, too reactive, too cold. But that message from Landon, that smug, taunting line, broke something final in me. It wasn't anger that took over. It was precision. Cold, clean, intentional precision. And once you start thinking like that, you stop hoping for closure. You start writing it yourself. I took that email and ran it through a metadata scraper I found on a forum for amateur sleuths. Landon was sloppy. The timestamp alone told me he wasn't careful. The IP address pointed me to a corporate VPN, his new job. I hadn't even known he'd landed on his feet again so quickly. That told me two things. One, he was trying to get ahead of the scandal I buried him in. And two, his ego hadn't been shattered yet. Bruised maybe, but intact. And I wasn't done. I made a call to Damon, the same friend who found his file weeks ago. I asked if he could dig into Landon's new employer. Damon didn't ask why. He just said, "Give me a day." Meanwhile, I started making a list, not out of revenge, but accountability. I wrote down names of people who had quietly mocked me, who enabled Belle's behavior, who laughed at Landon's jokes while I stood there carrying the weight of humiliation like some forgotten punchline. My phone buzzed the next morning. It was Damon. "Russ," he said, "you're going to want to see this." He sent over a file inside screenshots of Landon's social media activity from a dummy account. Same style of captions, same recycled content he used to impress clients at Belle's firm. Except now, he was repackaging it at his new job, pretending he'd created the campaigns himself. Word-for-word theft. Corporate plagiarism. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Belle had recently launched a new ad campaign, one that got her firm some minor industry recognition. Turns out she'd shared her pitch decks with Landon months ago during their private brainstorming sessions, as she called them in her text history. He'd taken pieces of it and presented it elsewhere. Different industry, different branding, but the DNA was unmistakable. The man hadn't just cheated on me with my wife. He'd used her to climb another rung in his career. And she, oblivious to that betrayal, was still too busy blaming me for ruining her image. I packaged the evidence quietly. No threats, no drama. Just a clean email sent to Landon's new employer ethics board with all the attachments and a brief summary. Submitted for review. Source files available upon request. I didn't even sign my name. 2 days later, Landon went dark online. No new posts, no company tags, nothing. But the real joy, it wasn't watching him fade. It was getting a call. Not from him, but from Belle. "Did you do something?" she asked, her voice shaking. "He got fired again. He's threatening to go public about me now." I said nothing for a long moment, then asked, "Did he have more of you than I ever did?" Silence. "Russell, I didn't mean," but I hung up. Not out of spite, just closure. See, the one thing Landon and Belle both misunderstood was that I didn't need revenge to heal. I didn't need validation. I didn't need to parade their mistakes. I just needed to make sure they could no longer weaponize me in their games. Because I might be the quiet one, but now they knew what I was capable of when I stopped staying quiet. After everything unraveled, the lies, the manipulation, the moments of doubt where I questioned if maybe I had gone too far, I started to rebuild, not with rage, not with revenge, with stillness, with choice. It's strange how quiet life becomes when you no longer need to perform for anyone. No one to impress, no one to beg for loyalty, just freedom. I sold the house, the one Belle and I had picked together, the one that held memories I didn't want to recycle. I found a new place, smaller, warmer, imperfect in ways that felt human. The first night I slept there, I didn't cry or smile or celebrate. I just exhaled. Really exhaled, like I hadn't in years. Belle tried reaching out a few more times. I didn't answer. There's no point digging through the rubble when you already know what's underneath. She and Landon went their separate ways. That much I heard through someone at her firm. He blamed her for the fallout, and she, in classic Belle fashion, played victim one last time before retreating from the spotlight. It didn't matter anymore. They were chapters I'd finally closed. But you want to know what surprised me the most? Forgiveness. Not of them, of myself. For staying too long, for ignoring red flags, for shrinking myself to keep someone else comfortable. I forgave that version of me because now I understood him. He wasn't weak. He was hopeful. And sometimes hope just gets misused. A few months later, I joined a small local hiking group. Nothing intense, just people who liked being outdoors and didn't care how fast you walked. On one of the first hikes, I met a woman named Elise. She wasn't flashy. She didn't dominate rooms, but she listened, asked questions, laughed with her whole face. We started talking, not texting all night, not rushing, just slow, steady conversations that didn't feel like a game. I don't know what this is yet. I'm not trying to make it into a redemption arc or a new love story, just for the sake of it. But for the first time in a long time, I'm not scared of being seen, not scared of being vulnerable.